So yeah, our next speaker is Cherie Dupont. She'll be speaking on dealing with the ego when becoming a medium. So Cherie is a psychic medium living in Melbourne, Victoria, ever since she was a child. She has been experiencing various paranormal and spiritual phenomena. It wasn't until she was in her 20s when she realised that very few people had the same experience as she did in the spirit world. Cherie has been helping people for several years as a medium, passing on accurate and beneficial messages from their deceased loved ones, including pets and other spirits. Cherie has completed a bachelor's degree in counselling and combines those skills in combination with her psychic consultation services. She also runs regular psychic mediumship development circles through Meetup and performs house clearings. She's branching out into the other areas of paranormal research and investigation and is able to lend a unique approach to formalising psychic and mediumship experiences for beneficial service purposes. So I'm really excited and pleased to welcome Cherie.
Thank you, Joyce. So this is a talk I gave roughly 2 years ago at a Ghostbusters event. And since then, I've received some feedback about some of the content. So I've tried to incorporate some of those questions, and I'm sure this will be very different though. And while we're focusing on the ego in developing mediumship, I think this is more of an overview of what I guess the perspective is as a medium, and sort of looking at aspects of counselling as well in terms of doing this type of work. So basically, mediumship is the ability to identify and discern individual spirits as opposed to just generalized psychic information. And so what I see is that there's a bit of a spectrum from certain terms that are used in this field. So a lot of people describe themselves as empaths or as psychics, but from the very sort of bottom end of that spectrum, people start off as basically just being sensitive, and then empathic, and then psychic, and then are mediums. And it's also been called into question whether there's some sort of accuracy in terms of that level of development. And accuracy is something that can be measured across the board in all of those aspects. So also, I forgot to mention with this talk, I'm very happy for anyone to ask questions as I make my way through, and I can cover off anything that comes to mind for people. So also, what I found is since I've been exploring actively using psychic and mediumship abilities, there seems to be a lot of rejection of mainstream religion. But basically the crux of everything all points to a source energy that we call divine. And so we all connect in with that energy. That's where we all come from when we incarnate. And mainstream religions can be a great stepping stone for understanding that hierarchy and finding a way of practicing connection with divine energies, even angels and higher beings. So it's very important that if you do begin working as a medium, that's not forgotten. There can be a lot of very useful tools in mainstream religions that can help bridge that divide between divine energy and the work that we do. So the medium's perspective is basically from the divine hierarchy. There is stepping down of energies as such in the types of beings that we encounter. So closest to divine energy are angels and archangels and different types of angels. And then further down, we'll find spirit guides, and then our team of guides, and then loved ones who have crossed over seem to be on a lower type of energy level to the higher beings that we connect with. And then it sort of continues to step down. So there are sort of more jaded or, more negative earthbound spirits, and then darker energies and entities as you progress further. So in doing readings, I'll often connect with whoever steps forward for a client. I do try to ask it. It depends on the question, really, of what the person has come to see me for. I've heard of other mediums, and this came up in the original talk that I gave at the Ghostbusters conference. Another medium mentioned that they just focus on one type of spirit when they're giving a talk, when they're giving a reading, sorry. But I just allow whoever is there to come through. So often I'll have guides, possibly angels, loved ones in spirit that I verify and bring through messages that way. So usually, depending on the question a client comes to me for, there'll be different opinions or perspectives of advice or wisdom that comes through from these spirits for the person I'm giving this information to. So I'll just check to see if that was a question. No? Okay. So obviously this has implications on 3D reality. And so when a lot of people don't accept this worldview, it may be because of religions and mainstream understandings of how the world works. But I find most people aren't open to the idea that, or aren't comfortable with the idea that we're surrounded by spirits. It's very scary for a lot of people. I think partially because of how it's been horrified in movies and on TV. So sometimes I have to be very careful about who I actually let know that I'm psychic and do mediumship work with. And a lot of people I speak with find the same thing. So because of this idea of firstly God existing and then angels and things of that nature in a sort of separate reality or different vibration of energy, it really unsettles a lot of people. And so it does take a bit of shifting mentally and emotionally to come to a place where that is able to be accepted. And obviously, as a medium, ideally, we want to be verifying everything that we're connecting with, especially people who have lived and have crossed over around someone. So describing clothing, hairstyles, hair color, physical features, character. You can get a sense of character when you connect with spirits, the way they stood, things they liked. They'll show you the house that they lived in. I'll show you their gardens or other hobbies. And all of this is connected through, it's connected through our heart. So that's another challenging aspect of the worldview of a medium. So everything is basically done through primarily the feeling in our heart, and that's our heart chakra. And so the chakra system is used to open and experience a level of reality that can be described and verified and allow contact and communication with the other side. And so when I say to some people, all of that connection is done through your heart, because of possibly trauma or their life experience or where they've developed at or to personally, sometimes it's difficult for someone to be able to accept that and actually connect in with that heart energy. So divine energy is the highest type of energy that there is, and that is all on the vibration of love. That emotion of love, not romantic love or superficial love or anything like that. It's a divine, large concept of love that somehow that vibration allows life to exist and for this communication to be reached. So the chakras as well, they basically operate all of our psychic senses. And so each one has a different role, but they have to be all used holistically, with the heart center mainly driving all of that work. Just noticed a question here. Do you think religions have put a block on people's ability to be perceptive? Yes, I think it can be quite individual though. So it depends on the person, that, what religion it was, how the person has been impacted by that. In a general sense, I think maybe intellectually, if someone grows up in society with an understanding of religion saying, no, you're, this priest or this hierarchy of this establishment has access to things that you don't have access to, I think that creates a sense of disempowerment. And so I think that's probably the strongest way that religions in mainstream society impact people's ability to experience things psychically and extrasensory wise. There's a lot of fear that's been created by religions as well. And so, I mean, if you're told connecting in with certain spirits is evil and can, stop you from entering heaven when you die, things like that, that's going to have a big impact on people having the onus on themselves to feel like they have a connection with God and spirits in a psychic way. I hope that answered that question. So another thing that comes into question with mediumship is a question of ethics. And so when someone is working as a medium, the ethics that they are working with are largely self-propelled and self-regulated. And it's often taken for granted by clients and people around, because there is no standard modus of operandi, like when you go to see a psychologist or someone with formal training. There's also no real guidance or supervision that mediums have to take. And so sometimes it can be, I've seen it often that it's largely it's open to misuse by amateurs and either misguided or just directly unethical individuals using that label that they're a medium or a psychic. And it can cause a lot of harm to people, can be really costly as well. Just noticing these questions. Could a malevolent entity contact you too? Yeah, so that's something that I think creates a lot of fear in people who are developing their psychic and mediumship ability, is this, having negative energies and spirits contact you or sort of create this guise that they're a benevolent being, but they're sort of ill-intended. So there are certain measures each medium takes to protect themselves from harm, or I will be talking about more of this a bit further into the talk. So basically, with working in divine energy, that will keep you protected to an extent, and using different forms of light and protection measures. What I was going to say is that sometimes malevolent entities, sorry, another question just come in. So sometimes malevolent entities sort of pose as being good beings and give misguided information. But that's where, I guess, personal development comes in. So each medium and everyone working as a psychic basically should continue working on their personal development, in particular the ego, because these dark entities usually use the ego as a way of accessing a medium and sort of encouraging them to do negative things, or using them for various ends. And it can be really, some mediums I've seen have a lot of hubris, and that can be utilized to a dark entity's end. So it just depends on the situation. With the personal development that I'm talking about, that can really allow a clearing to take place, or some kind of acknowledgement that something's not right with a particular spirit a medium might be working with, to clear that away. I always recommend for people not to use psychic tools like Ouija boards, or other implements that don't have full consciousness and the ability to feel, I guess, and reject or ascertain a type of energy like an actual living medium can, because the certain tools can actually be portals and have attachments of spirits as well. And spirit attachments are quite common. So I remember a couple of years ago, it's longer than that, maybe about 4 years ago, I had a really bad energy attachment from a meditation practice that I performed in a group that was directed to us to perform. And I had some experiences of hearing a voice in my room. I was incredibly drained. I was not myself. My personality had changed. And it took the entire energy of this group, all of whom were able to do mediumship to some degree, to release this spirit from my energy field. And in that session, I was feeling anxiety and all kinds of unpleasant feelings running through my chakras as we were holding hands and sending this spirit to the light. And as we sort of we're reading with who this spirit was in that process, we discovered that it was someone who had committed suicide. And so certain spirits who are sort of lower down on that hierarchy, who are more earthbound, will attach to people's energy and affect them in a negative way. But the spirit attachments are very common for all sorts of people. There's a level at which I remain vigilant and protect my energy, but at the same time, I don't try to be too overcautious, where I'm sort of so preoccupied and caught up in keeping my energy clear. So different mediums have different perspectives on that. I personally don't think that it's possible to be 100% clear of all types of energy or anything that doesn't belong 100% of the time. So the question that came up here is it possible to be a medium and not believe in angels and God?
Okay.
So
that bell didn't help us. No, that didn't help much.
Got some noise coming in now. I would say I don't believe accurately. So if you're at a level where you're practicing to be a medium, or you are performing mediumship, and you don't have a sense of angels and God, I would be confused as to how you work with energy and how that medium would be practicing, because sending spirits to the light and having a sense of a hierarchy is kind of a blueprint of how we would work with spirits. So I'd be very curious if someone was doing mediumship and not believe in anything higher than this level of existence. Does that answer the question? And then Renata, I think. But no answers. I think it's very helpful to begin with an understanding of God and that divine energy and have that hierarchy established. So in coming back to this, in discussing ethics, most spiritualist churches have a code of principles or philosophies stipulating their belief system. So that's another good way of having a foundation or a base of basically a worldview or an understanding of how to work with spirits and what to do in certain cases. They do believe in God and hierarchy, and you'll if you're practicing as a medium, you will have experiences with higher beings that can only be explained in this kind of paradigm. So ethics from a counselling perspective, there's a lot of literature academically and studies in psychology that give over ways of being able to work with someone therapeutically. But as a medium, our role is basically to give over information to the client. And so that often doesn't allow the client a way of processing much of what's being received. So everything needs to be given kind of context, and there needs to be a lot of interaction with the client to understand where they're coming from and what they want to find out. So it is very different to having a client working through questions and answers and realizing things themselves. Sometimes this can be open to someone manipulating that process. So as I mentioned earlier, there can be unintended or misuse by amateurs or misguided readers who want to take advantage of the client. So it's some readers too can be quite authoritative, and so cold reading and other ways of not using verifiable information to give over information can be misused. In terms of the ego, most people have a very basic understanding of what the ego is. Sorry, got a few questions that have come through. Do spirit and divine get tired of people who take the path to mediumship and then get caught up with everyday life and don't practice? That is a common question, actually. We'll come back to the ego discussion in a moment. A lot of people wonder, whether they even have spirit guides and whether spirits are looking out for them, or whether they're taking up too much time of people in spirit, or certain beings with their questions, or just wanting to discuss things with them. And when you're working with evolved high beings, they are ever present and ever loving, and they are omnipresent. So there's no real question about, are they willing enough to spend time with me? That is a given. Like, that is taken, you can take that for granted, that they are always there when you need them. They don't have the same kind of limited resources that we do, being in a 3D reality. There is personal work to be done when you are a medium, to be able to come to a place where you're able to accept that you are surrounded by spirits who are really loving and that are looking out for us. There's a lot of human psychology that stops us from being able to accept concepts like that, whether it's from childhood or just mainstream society, trauma possibly. The path towards mediumship is a very worthwhile path to take, because it does teach you that love is at the crux of everything that we do, and we are made of love, and that we have endless, limitless support in spirit. So there's just another question here too. Someone said, at times I can hear spirit. Yeah, so that would be spontaneous clairaudience. There are different ways of perceiving psychic information through the psychic senses. There are 5 main clair senses that are mentioned, which is hearing, clairaudience, clairvoyance. You can smell spirit, you can taste spirit. All of the senses that we have physically have a sense spiritually and psychically. And our brain is able to perceive all of that without us physically having that sense there. All of that can be exercised with chakra work and guided meditations where all of those faculties are used to receive information spiritually and from in a psychic sense. So coming back to the ego, there's basically a way that I have come to perceive the ego as being in three states. So there can be a very passive state, a very neutral state, or a very overactive, sort of overcompensatory state. And when we're doing any work with spirit, it needs to be in a very balanced, or as people say, your ego needs to be dropped. It needs to come to a place where it's able to step back and allow the senses to be the main way of perceiving the world and energies. The ego is just our sense of self. And so if that sense of ego is at the forefront, judging or feeling threatened or upset about anything, or because it is our way of protecting ourselves and staying safe, it will create blocks or misperceive sensory information and energy. So I'll just see, is that, there's a question that's come through. I accept and respect the spirit realm. Does a human being that has passed into spirit become extinct in spirit world once reborn back into the earth, or continue in spirit? That's a good question. There are really complicated, I guess, philosophical questions around what happens to us when we cross over. I can say that I get a sense that even though someone has crossed over and are able to be described and verified in spirit, that I don't think that would stop their initial soul energy from being reincarnated, because we've, at investigations and in other cases, people often see spirits from hundreds of years ago, if not more. So there are various worldviews around what actually happens in terms of that. I don't have an exact answer. I'm more a medium from a practical perspective. So I just personally haven't had enough practical experience to describe what I think exactly happens. So I hope for this person you find some answers around that. There are many books and many people channel a lot of information from spirit around what exactly happens. So there might be a paradigm that you find that you like to sit with, but I'm sort of still open on that one. There's another question here too. Can people who are not mediums be a channel to receive spiritual guidance or even information? I'm thinking of people who need a muse, get an inspiration, like for a songwriting, painting, or book writing. Yes, all the time. I believe everyone, just by way of being human, is able to perceive and be able to work with psychic energy. And even people who don't seem that open or sensitive will often be conduits for spirit in passing on messages. So you might have a conversation with someone who you thought was, not even spiritual, or the antithesis of psychic, and you'll just have a moment with them where some kind of deep message comes through that you can feel is actually from spirit. As I mentioned, we all have spirit guides. We all have, past lives, and we're all spiritual beings. So yes, we all have moments where Joyce mentioned earlier, where we can be in the flow and we can be connected with spirit, and that comes through us in various ways. Sorry, Marie asked about possession. Joyce, it hasn't come up online. Can you read me the question?
Yeah, she just asked, does possession happen?
Yep. Okay. Yes, it can, and it does. What I've come to realize or learn is that usually possession happens when someone is not in their full capacity. Their ego is not in a strong enough state. So it happens a lot when someone is sleeping, or just about to wake up, or if their energies, they might be in a very traumatized, fragile state, or they may be addicted to drugs, or there's some sort of mental sort of issue that's going on. It could even just be, a certain way someone has begun holding their own energy, where possessions sort of creep in and then begin taking hold. I think it's very rare for someone to be possessed for an extended period of time. When I've heard about it from people and clients, it's more been that the possession comes and goes. So the spirit is sort of taking advantage of them as much as they can. But I don't think it's a very common thing at all. Does that sort of clarify that? I hope that clears up that question. These aspects are things I think people have fear around, but in all of my experience of working with spirit, it's the most loving and supportive way of connecting with the universe that I think everyone should be able to experience on some level. So yes, there are sort of confusing or kind of unpleasant things that can happen sometimes, but I think that's why it's important to take a very solid, grounded way of developing this ability from the very beginning, so that you sort of don't become misguided and open or susceptible to unpleasantness and negativity. So the ego is also something, if you begin meditating, you're able to step away from a sense of your own ego and become more of an observer. And that is really what is required when you're connecting with spirit. So there needs to be an ability to step away from ourselves and just receive information energetically and spiritually, and observe all of those senses. It's really important too, when giving a reading to someone, that you describe only what you're receiving, because many times I've been tripped up myself on seeing a certain thing and then drawing conclusions logically about, if I'm seeing a man in overalls and, short hair and he's quite large, or, his demeanor and everything, logically in my mind, I might say he seems like a mechanic, when really he's not a mechanic. He works on a farm, or, somewhere else where they have overalls. So in drawing conclusions about what's being received energetically and psychically, you can actually undo the work. So it's very important to be truthful and simple about what you're receiving psychically and energetically. There's been another question here, and it says, why would a spirit, once having reached a higher plane, want to be concerned, bothered with mortals? Because what we discover is, in near-death experiences and as mediums and readers, is spirits basically describe that once we die, we enter into a truer state, which is that of love and compassion and true, genuine concern for all living things, in particular who we've been connected with in this life. So it's kind of this is something going back to what I was saying earlier, where, why would a spirit want to help me? Why would I need people around me in spirit? We're all connected energetically, and we all exist on a vibration of love and connection. So it's not really a question of why would they be bothered with helping us. It's just a natural flow of who we are energetically. And, there is a link between families in spirit, even when there's been bad blood, still being there with a higher sense of understanding and morality, wanting to support who is left behind, wanting to right wrongs, understanding things they just couldn't understand when they were alive, and wanting to pass on information that will help the people who are still on this plane to ascend and do well. So I hope that answers that question. Apologize for my throat if it sounds like I'm struggling a little bit. So in moving on from the ego, in the psychic circle that I hold, we go through a guided meditation where we open the chakras and we connect our energy by anchoring it into the core of the earth and bring a white light up through all our chakras and our body, and then up into the highest point of God source energy, which, spatially is below us and above us. And so with our chakras open, we then enter into a landscape that we see visually, and then we sort of exercise our psychic muscles, which is being able to perceive things through the different clair senses. And we try to receive as much of that information as we can until we sort of begin finding a path on the ground and then a door that we open and allow our main spirit guide to step through into that landscape with us. And so I advocate for everyone who is undertaking psychic development to begin working with their main spirit guide. It's a really good foundation and way of developing into mediumship, where you discern and validate spirits other than yourself or your higher self. And it also allows them to give you wisdom and guidance around how to develop psychically, or, personally, if there are any issues in your life. What I found is that the way that I work with spirit is that, some people think, it's almost like witchcraft. You're getting spirits to change things for you, or you're using them to your own ends. It's basically like an amazing support network. So they can give you insight into ways of holding your own energy, so that, if you're going through a hard time, you're able to deal with what's on your plate. You might get a bit of insight into what's coming up, but it's mostly about support for yourself as a person. And that's really what I try to have my readings about as well, which is a focus on the present and how someone in the present moment can better handle or make plans for what's coming up for them in the future, rather than what will happen in the future, which can change and be influenced by anything that's happening in the present. So when meeting with someone in spirit, like they show on TV, sometimes it's clearer than other times visually, but often clairvoyance is quite foggy or not disconnected. It's quite, you'll notice one set of details and then see another. Like when you're looking at someone, you're never sort of looking at someone's entire body. If you're sitting with someone and having a conversation, you're looking at their eyes, or you're noticing their clothes or their hand, what they're doing. Your eyes are sort of focused in on one particular aspect, and that's what it can be like psychically. The other senses too will come in and create a holistic picture of what's going on and what the meeting is about and any messages that come through. So what I've noticed is that there are common things that happen in the meditation, especially for people when they've done this the first time. Often when it's the first time they're meeting with their main guide, it will be really emotional, and they'll be really almost in awe or taken aback by the intensity of that experience, and having a sense of someone they're so close with yet haven't seen in such a long time consciously. I've just noticed another question coming. How can you tell it's not your imagination? So that's a common question that is in the circle as well. Part of it is by practice. So the more we connect psychically, the more you can tell when it's your, mind cognition, anticipating something or planning to see something. So often when it's surprising and you're not sure what to make of what you're seeing, and you sort of have that sense of you have to accept this, but you're still a bit confused about why this is coming forward, that's a good sign that it's not your imagination, because you don't have that prior cognition in place. And another way is that you sort of don't, if your ego is in a neutral state, you're not going to be trying to control anything that happens. To a point, yes, you have sort of the basic outline of the plan of this meditation and what we're doing, but everything else is sort of just being received rather than generated by yourself. So that sense of you're receiving this information, not, forcing things to happen or expecting things to happen a certain way, that's a good sign that it's not your imagination. Another thing is sometimes if something is too clear and direct, and you don't have that fogginess or sort of that difficulty in trying to see something as clearly as you would with your imagination, that's actually a good sign that it's something being received clairvoyantly. But basically just practice will show you over time the way that you receive psychic information as opposed to imagining something yourself. I hope that's clear. So meeting with the spirit guide too is different to doing mediumship with, say, loved ones who have crossed over. There are different types of energy vibration. So there's a higher type of vibration that's involved with communicating with angels and spirit guides. Vibration is basically the feeling of love that we all carry in our own life force energy. So if there's a very dark negative spirit, to say at a location on an investigation that I've come across, they can often have very negative feelings. So you can feel very sort of quite depressed and hopeless or trapped, or sometimes you even get a sense of what they died from. Whereas if you connect with an angel or something of a very high level energy, then you feel energized and you feel, enthusiasm and love and confidence and just acceptance. So this vibration that we carry in ourselves, it is something to develop as a medium to be able to connect with spirits as well. Some people describe that vibration is something that's sort of like a physical state. So cutting out meat or processed foods and things like that, all of that can have an impact on vibration, but it's basically how brightly our own light shines. And so when you're able to increase your vibration, and all the things that go with that increase as well, like energy, the ability to feel love, the capacity to care for others and have empathy, all of that allows your energy and your aura to shine more brightly, and therefore be able to connect more clearly and accurately with beings in spirit. So I've just got 10-minute warning from Joyce. I'll just check my last notes. So if there's anything else I want to add from my notes, it's that some people are predisposed to be more psychic than others. It seems to be a genetic, there's some kind of genetic component, but I do believe everyone is able to open up to that sensory field in one way or another. I would say too that a question that's come in is it difficult for online groups and Circle because of lockdown? Does it work the same? And what's it like having to work remotely? And what we found is that in Circle, it is still quite strong, having the group energy and all of our guides with us. It is a little bit different though. So especially when someone's learning mediumship, it is easier in person, I think, because we are more able to work as batteries for each other with our energy, with our physical energy in the same space. But it doesn't impact the overall experience and ability to read. So Joyce, did you want me to open this up to further questions?
Maybe we have time for a couple of questions, and then after our last speaker, people can come back and ask for more questions. So maybe a couple more questions if anybody wants to ask. Mm-hmm. Yes, Terry, can spirits have a good time with us in group sittings? Yes,
yes, they absolutely do. And even if you're just having a coffee with someone, they're all networking, they're all of our guides are networking with each other and talking about, our plans and goals, and all kinds of things happen in spirit. Often when I connect in with my guide, I see him writing letters. I've often got a sense he's a bit of an ambassador in spirit. So yes, they absolutely do. And can you recommend any circles to join? There is the circle that I'm running. That is at the moment every week. I'm thinking of changing it back to a Wednesday, but it's currently on a Friday night. I'm sure Joyce can send you the information, or it's here somewhere.
Yes. Our meetup groups. So the meetup group is Psychic Circles.
Yep.
I can send a link.
Yep.
Yeah.
There are also groups at the spiritualist churches as well. So you'll have to sort of maybe have a look around and see what might be suitable. Some of them require you to undertake some studying before they'll let you participate in a group. But it's really what you're guided towards if you want to develop that. So is the future set, especially the big stuff? I've heard we come in with set life plans. Is this true? Yes, in my understanding, there are some key milestones we're set to complete and achieve when we incarnate, but everything around that is not solid. And so I see it as more of a likely timeline that's going to happen for someone, especially if they come to me with questions like, are they going to travel in the next 2 years or something like that? There's a lot of stuff that is really not set for us. Even our life path, that could change in terms of years, depending on our choices and what path we choose to go down, and the influence of other people around us. So it is really sort of up in the air at the end of the day. There's another question here. I wonder if working virtually enhances spiritual resonance. The physical element is transcended. I don't feel like it's more powerful remotely. I feel like if anything, there are more studies showing that even paranormal activity of, ghost anomalous activity is influenced by the energy of someone in the room. So I think physically there's some kind of energy that we share that boosts psychic ability, in particular mediumship. There's another question here. Can a training studying to be a medium help you lose track of harmony with people? I find it very difficult to trust enough people. I think, yes, in terms of your overall holistic sensitivity, that can often make interacting with others feel quite abrasive, or sometimes you'll sort of find limits on your energy when you're carrying yourself in a more sensitive way. Sometimes too, it can just be more awareness around toxic behaviors or energies that people have that don't sit right for you. So that is something that needs to be counteracted if you begin developing psychic or mediumship ability.
Maybe just one more question, because we need to get on to the next speaker.
I think Ramses just has a question.
Yep.
We're trying to evaluate a mediumship teaching method, and we want to evaluate the possibility of virtual readings. What advice can you share so that we can facilitate as much as we can possibly in the virtual reading session? That's a big question. What I found is it really needs to be a client's own ability to connect in with their loved ones in spirit to begin with, and their team of guides. So just sort of off the bat, trying to practice mediumship remotely, I think sort of it's too much to aim for. So yeah, personal work within the person learning mediumship is the most important thing, establishing that. I hope that answers that question for Ramses. Are we out of time, Joyce? I think Emma's asked.
Okay, maybe one more. Emma, did you want to comment?
Yes, and I just wanted to say and acknowledge everything that Cherie said. I think I have some gifts, clairaudient, psychic abilities that haven't been honed like Cherie's. But one thing that everybody, I think, does have, I notice no matter what happens in my life, and sometimes I can be shut off or in a depressive state. However, the basic guidance that I get from my guides normally comes from my body's reaction. So if I've been asked to do something, or and I've said yes, and then maybe my whole body starts freezing, or I get anxiety or whatnot, that's my guide's way of saying, no, don't do that. You're on the wrong path. And then my logic might kick in and go, oh, but, say it's a job. Oh, but, but this job, it's going to offer you security and that's what you want. And, if you don't take it, but my whole, everything in my fibre of my being saying, don't take it. And I've learned to listen to it. And then I find out later, I'm like, thank gosh I didn't take that job, because now I've got my dream job. But I didn't know that at the time. And I think that, I don't know, Cherie, do you think that's like a basic skill that people have? Like just that body sensation?
I think it's one of the clear senses, definitely. I think we just don't have a word for it. There are a couple of other senses too that have been more accurately described. One to do with having one's bearing energetically and clairvoyantly, and another one of being able to be centered. So as people begin, studying this more, I think we'll have better ways of clarifying these exact senses and ways that comes through to us in a practical sense. Yeah. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you so much, Cherie. Yeah.
That's okay, Joyce. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope this will encourage and inspire people to get more in touch with their, the spirit world, which is all around us. And Cherie does very regular online mediumship courses and called psychic circles. If you had heard of meetup.com and search for psychic circles, I'm pretty sure I've put your link into my website, Cherie. So if you go into my website, salubriousevents.com, and look down at her profile. I've got her link there. But if I remember, I'll send everyone a link again. So thank you so much, Cherie. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.